maybe have bought your gown or are looking at your gown size and you look at the sizes you're trying on and go, why is it like that? Why is it so small? Why is it so big? Why do I not fit into a size I'd normally fit into? A shape of a mannequin is, like I said, very different to a human body.
My word, yeah.
The bust is very high and pointy and it's a little small.
Yes.
And the torso is quite long and the bum's very flat. All right, so I'm Marky, one of our alteration experts, and I'm here with Julie, who we're going to talk about the idea of standardized sizing and where all that came about and how it applies to you guys in bridal trying to find your size.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's the great conundrum, isn't it?
It is, especially when you maybe have bought your gown or are looking at your gown size and you look at the sizes you're trying on and go, why is it like that? Why is it so small? Why is it so big? Why do I not fit into a size I'd normally fit into?
Yeah, absolutely. And what Mark and I did before our chat today is we did a bit of research to sort of go back and try and determine where the concept of standard sizing, where it came from and where it started. So we've done our research and we've looked at this, but if anybody watching this has any additional information that they feel that they could share, that we could learn from, please do feel free to make a note in the comments that can help us all learn a bit more about this great mystery that certainly applies to the bridal world that we live in as well. So you did some research, Mark, on the American side of that. What did you find out? Yeah. Tell us.
So I found that it was actually war-based. So in World War II, the US, they had the Department of Agriculture do a study based on women's sizing for war uniforms. Yes. And they did the same with men, but we're talking about bridal here. And they basically did, a mass survey on body measurements for women.
15,000 people, is it?
Yeah, it was about 15,000 people. So with that, they took the main measurements and then sent it off to a statistics bureau, and they came up with the sizing that, not that we know of today, but at the time they knew of.
Yeah, but wasn't it something interesting that it was the US Department of Agriculture in the 40s that initiated this survey? And your understanding is that was a result of the Second World War.
Yeah.
Women working in factories,
Yes.
men abroad, that they needed to find a standardized way of outfitting people that was economical and economical, made sense, and made it easier for people when they're needing to wear the various, I suppose, army outfits that they were wearing.
Yeah, exactly. Because up until that point, a lot of clothing had been custom made by then. So then to be able to have the surplus of uniforms that they needed, they had to basically make them in standard sizing.
Yes.
So that they could just say, okay, you're this size, let's give you that size and off you go. Well, you're that size, let's give you that size and off you go.
Yeah.
And that was fun.
Production line stuff, which they had
exactly.
for efficiency, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. And that was fine with men because they just did small, medium and large, and that was off you go. But with women, because their shapes were a little bit different, they actually put thought into it and they did the measurements to try and get as standard a sizing range as they could and a bit more of an in-depth sizing range as they could.
Yes.
Just to make sure that, I guess, they were covering as many bases and sizes as they could for the women.
Yeah.
Because it was probably a safety thing as well, that you need to have a uniform that fits as close as you can, because if you get a sleeve caught in machinery or something, then you need to be able to work safely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing, of course, it didn't stop at the end of the Second World War, going back a long, long time, but it then came into mainstream fashion, whereby the concept of sizing versus what it had been, and if you were of good means, you might go to your dressmaker and be fitted, and they would tailor make your winter wardrobe or your spring wardrobe. It actually gave accessibility to a much vaster group of people to buy clothes and buy more clothes if they didn't have the means to have a new costume created from every year. Yeah. I mean, the concept, as we know, of the couture made-to-measure gowns, which are made exactly to your figure and your measurements from the start to the finish, is something that has always been part of the bridal couture world. But it changed and bridal jumped on board as well. But what's interesting is that from 1944 through until, 1983, it wasn't until 1983 in America that they withdrew the standard sizing, and that sort of changed the landscape again and allowed people to create different size charts. And then I think that's how it's split in many different ways, to be so different that any of us can open our wardrobe and see hanging a variety of different sizes.
Yeah, because they realized in 1983 that it had been about, say, 30 years since they'd done this study of the sizes. So I think they realized that people had grown taller and they'd grown broader since that sizing, so that they realized it was a bit sort of outdated by then. So without any new research into this kind of study, they just declared it outdated and they moved on.
And off she goes. Well, I did some, isn't that fascinating? I did some reading myself, and my sort of research led me to Italy. And just joyfully Italy. And that their ready-to-wear industry adopted sizing based on fashion norms rather than the scientific data.
So they're just going on vibe. They loved it.
Yeah. And so they created like the 38, 40, 42, and that the general structure of their ready-to-wear that they introduced in their country that sort of then spread was based on the hourglass figure.
Yeah.
And that has stuck and that has stayed. And as you say, so importantly, every generation is getting taller and broader. Their shape is changing. So measurement norms that date back a long, long time ago don't have any currency in what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then our studies and learning about it led us to Australia.
Yeah, because obviously we are in Australia, so we wanted to know why or how these measurements sort of shape into what Australian brands are doing or what Australian Bridal's doing.
Yes.
So with that, we found that they had done the standard sizing in the 1959, 1960s.
1959.
Yeah, and they pulled on the US study that they did from the Department of Agriculture, as well as Burley, the bra company. Now, I'm not familiar with the bra company, but you were a bit more familiar with it, yeah.
Yes, I am.
So they
hold
pulled
everything, hold them up. They do their job, absolutely, that's for sure.
Yeah. So that would make sense that they would have, say, bust, waist and hip measurement from a lot of, I'm guessing a lot of either clients or from a lot of their making that they do with a lot of their patenting, maybe, that they would have that. But they became outdated in 2009. So that was, say, 50 years after they declared this to be a standard in Australia.
Yes.
These measurements as well became outdated in around 2009. So then they just deregulated those sizings as well. And that left every designer, every brand to make their own size chart.
Yeah, absolutely. We were studying that it was the old standards, which makes sense because in 2009, I remember 2009 well, but it still feels like a while ago, compared to 1959. If we look back on our generation's grandparents, parents, it's almost a bit weird and nonsensical that they would use that. So I understand why in 2009 they deregulated it, but it left the Australian size market unregulated. So that led to, in our case, Bridal, every designer we work with, they have a size chart that is unique to their collection and gowns. And the point of talking about this and having this conversation is that if a bride comes in, and we've had it where they've fallen in love with two gowns, or there've been instances where they've wanted two looks. You know, one of your brides recently, she wanted two looks, and it was, well, why am I a size 8 in her case in this gown and size 10 in the other style?
Yeah.
And hopefully this conversation that we're having now goes by way of explaining that coming in and saying I'm a size X or 10, 15 or 16, whatever, doesn't have any currency in Bridal.
That's it. Or it's the same like what you just said. We've had we have designers from around the globe.
Yes.
And we've had brides fit into a certain size for an Australian brand, but if you had the same size in an American brand, it's way too big because they've got their sizing standards. But then if you go into, say, an English or a European sizing, it's too small.
That's right.
Because of their sizing standards that they came up with based on the hourglass figure and the aesthetic as opposed to actual mathematical measurements.
Yes.
So it's a different sort of can of beans, whichever designer you choose.
Yeah. No, it's quite interesting, but I think it is an important conversation to have, because whether we like it or not in the world, and as a woman, I don't know whether it's the same for gentlemen, but the size component can actually play a big thing in our minds as to, does a size designate me as a certain type of person? Do I feel comfortable, or do I have a feeling that's not good because of a digit and a number?
Yeah. And I've had that with some brides as well in the order where they said, I've always been this size. So I don't know why I'm up a size in this. And we've had to explain that to them, that bridal sizing is smaller because of these sort of regulations that happened.
Yes.
And the fact that it is unregulated now, that designers are using measurements from the 50s. And that's why they're also...
Or they're not, and they've created their own size chart that based on perhaps the fabrics that they're using, the intrinsic pedigree or the cut of the garments that they have as part of their collection.
The dressmaker mannequins that they're draping from, that could also be why they're using it, because dressmaker mannequins are a different shape to a human body.
They are, and there's no warmth or flesh. It's a hard object. So when you're creating a gown, let's go to draping. If you're creating a gown on a mannequin and you've got the design chops, how do you interpret that to then fit on a body that's going to be moving and dancing in the case of bridal?
Well, I think it's very interesting because you can sort of tell the designers who use a mannequin to drape as opposed to designers who are used to working on the body.
Yes.
Because a shape of a mannequin is, like I said, very different to a human body in that the bust is very high and pointy and it's a little small, and the torso is quite long and the bum's very flat.
Yes.
So you can kind of see when a dress comes in. That's it. It doesn't look like a human. So you can see when like a design comes in, you can see a bust point is very high and it's very tight. It's very tight curve.
Yes.
Whereas it's not like rounded as a bust should be.
Yeah, and a bust has, depending on the weight of the bust, will sit and fall to its natural position.
Yeah, exactly. It's not sitting like super high up on where a dress form's bust would be. And
unless
like
you
a
hoik
torso.
them up.
Yeah, exactly. Get a lot of tape up in there.
Yeah.
But, and like a torso is super long on a dressmaker's dummy. So a lot of the times we spend a lot of our alteration time actually shortening the waist on a lot of gowns because they've been draped on a mannequin and they're just so long for the proportions of humans nowadays.
Yeah.
So it's just about knowing, I think, the difference between a dressmaker's proportions and an actual human's proportions. Yeah. And sort of, I think the designers will do what the designers want to do.
Yes.
But it's just knowing how to not fix these because they're not necessarily an issue, but how to sort of get the right fit based on these, based on how they've been patterned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose for the designers who are doing that made to order, which is based on a set number of measurements, usually it's bust, waist and hips. Sometimes there's additional like under bust or high hip, low hip length. Most of our gowns do come in as a standard length. And then they either need to be shortened in most cases, or if somebody's particularly tall, they've got the option of ordering extra length to accommodate that. But they're not meeting the person as well. Yeah, exactly. So they've got to create a collection that allows them to have their collections priced reasonably, that are at a level of appeal to our brides. Because if they had to make every single one to the exact measurements, it then becomes a made-to-measure gown.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's where the different price point comes in for a custom dress because, like you said, if they had to draft every single dress specific to the bride, that's a whole patterning change that they have to do for every single dress. Yeah. And that's, going custom, and that's it's a lot of time and it's a lot of resources for that designer to then do that.
It's a different thing. But it's quite interesting. I mean, we have, as I mentioned, we've got a book of size charts. So when our brides come in, if you come in and you find your dream dress and we measure you, don't worry about the number or the symbol in the label because it doesn't actually relate to who you are as a person because it's not a regulated thing. The key factor, I think, is falling in love with your gown, ensuring that the closest fit does get ordered so that when the alterations time comes and you step in, and our alterations manager, Emily, also steps in, and you start to work your magic to personalise the gown for the bride, that not to put pressure on yourselves, not to put pressure in a world based on that, because in some ways there's no rhyme or reason as to why it is the way it is.
There isn't. And every dress as well is unique to, as much as you want them to fit snugly into the size that you've chosen, every dress is unique and has those nuances in their fit to make them some might be a little bit slimmer, some might be a little bit more, they might have a bit more excess that lets you order a bit smaller if you wanted to, or they might be so structured that if you're ordering a size, you can order down a size because they're so structured, they suck you in a little.
Yeah, absolutely.
So little things like that as well are what we take into account when we order.
And that's the expertise of helping and guiding a bride to her gown choice and ordering the correct size.
Yeah,
well.
Exactly.
What about fabric? Whilst we're here.
Why not?
So you can have two identical dresses, and in one gown the bride is, I don't know, say she's a size 16, and in the other one suddenly she's a size 18. They're exactly the same gown, but they're different fabrics.
Yeah, so that's definitely possible with the different fabrics because, and it depends on the way they've been cut as well. So say, like with a lot of the bias cut slips that we have that have that stretch in them and that movement in them, they'll stretch with the body. So you can afford to either go down a size if you wanted to, or you could go, what's the word? If you have it cut just on a regular...
Cut on the straight.
Yeah, cut on the straight grain, which means it'll have no stretch at all.
That's right.
You'll have to end up ordering either your truer size or go up a size so that you've got the room to sort of play with.
Well, that's right, because you've got to walk and you've got to move and sit and feel. And then if it's on the bias, which is your 45-degree angle...
Yeah, that's where your stretch comes in.
It's stretched incredible. The difference is incredible.
But it can mean as well, because it's got that stretch, sometimes the designers can cut it a bit narrower. So it does also mean that, like what we've been saying, we've got to take into account the nuances of every cut that we've got.
Yes.
And just sort of make sure that when the gowns are being ordered in, we're getting that right size. Because even though it says a hip measurement to our size chart, we have to just make sure that the gowns coming in actually fit the hip measurement that we've been given by the designer.
One of the great things that we have here as well, when we work with our designers, we often have sessions with them. And they take us through every gown and they say, if you're ordering this gown, order size down, as you say, if it's corseted, because you've got the room to bring the gown in. With this one, there's no give, go a size up. So the collaboration that we have at Bluebell with our designers is I mean, they're almost like family to us, that we know them so well. So that means in reflection that when our brides come in, and we're having this conversation, which we always do, around size, what's the best size to order? Because the truth, of course, is the brides want to minimise the number of alterations that they have. And we try and facilitate that whilst understanding how the sizes work, what's the best size, and how, in truth, it is just a number in a garment and doesn't have any reflection on someone's, hopefully, their self-esteem. Because it varies so greatly because it's not regulated.
That's it. It's not regulated, and it is fabric. Fabric is very... Fabric does not do what you want it to. It doesn't. It has not that it has a mind of its own, but you can make a dress.
Sounds like my dog. He never does what I want him to do. That's like, River, bye.
Exactly, and you can make a dress the same exact way out of out of the same fabric, the exact same, and there'll be minor differences in measurement, and that could be the difference between, say, a size, and I know we call that tolerance here.
Yes,
but it just means that we have to put that thought into when we're ordering and what the sizes are and how we order for the bride.
Yes, absolutely. And the key, of course, always being that when they come in and have their meet the dress moment, it's broad smiles.
Yeah, exactly. No. We want everyone to be happy when they try on their gowns.
Absolutely. So in terms of sizing and understanding sizing, what would be your tips for brides just to take home or take into their heart or to take note of when it comes to standard sizing with made-to-order bridal gowns?
Well, with the standard sizing, it's the main thoughts that we have here is that it is just a number. It's just a number that correlates to the size that we've chosen, which is your closest fit. Yes. It's not a measure of your worth, or it's not a judgment either. It's just the size that fits your measurements closely to this designer. Yeah. So it doesn't mean anything really. Mm-hmm. Second one is that the size doesn't matter. It's about the fit. And that's the main thing. The fit is the thing that matters.
Yes.
So, and that will be in alterations when we go through and we make it perfect. That's what really matters. Yeah. It's not about the little number that comes across on the order.
Yeah, that's right. And I think also when it comes to the sizing, depending on the silhouette, we generally would order, if you're wearing a sort of a mermaid gown or a straighter gown, we order the gown to your biggest measurement so that when the gown comes in at your biggest measurement, you've got it's going to fit you there.
Exactly.
And it will need to be finessed for the waist and the bust and the length as well.
Because we've seen gowns come in from other exterior places and they've tried to find a happy medium.
Yes.
And you can't find a happy medium with fit because it ends up being too tight in the hips and then it's still too loose up top.
Yes.
And it just doesn't work. You can't find a happy medium. You have to get the fitting right somewhere, which is your biggest measurement. Yeah. You know, you just can't find a happy medium. Yeah. You just have to make sure that you're fitting something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Were there any other thoughts or tips that you could think of?
Yeah. Size is generic. It's not personal.
That's
right. It sort of rolls into everything. This is sort of I feel like it's a feel good. I feel like I'm giving a lot of feel good advice with this one. Yes. But it's basically, don't worry about the number mainly. The main takeaway from this is that it is just a number. It is what we use to help find the size based on measurements, but it is just a number.
Yeah, absolutely. And to feel amazing. And if you love the gown, just love the gown.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. It's not about worth. It's just a number. And we're here to make it fit perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. It's what we're here for. And I hope you found this helpful, sort of demystified that process of size and what it actually means in bridal. And if anyone as well at home has any thoughts on sizing, any experience with sizes as well in their bridal journey, then feel free to let us know.
Yep, we'd love to hear from you. But thanks for joining and thanks for the chat, Mark.
Thank you.
If you did enjoy today's episode, please do click like and the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.